Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, December 1st. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, let's start with the White House. President Trump announced he's invited the families of West Virginia National Guard members Sarah Bergstrom and Andrew Wolf to the White House. Bergstrom was killed, and Wolf is in critical condition after both were ambushed last Wednesday by an Afghan national who worked with the CIA. Tom, Trump posted about wanting to, quote, permanently pause migration from third world countries, and is talking about what he calls, quote, reverse migration. Are we going to see a real change in immigration policy due to this terrible tragedy?
We might. I mean, I do think it was, look, we didn't get a chance to talk about this, and it seems like it happened, so long ago, but just a tragic situation of this Afghan national who was part of a CIA squad in Afghanistan that was killing and capturing ISIS terrorists, came over here, after we withdrew under the Biden administration, was apparently applying for asylum under the Trump administration. His green card was in process when he walked up apparently on the street and just shot these two National Guard officers, killing, as you mentioned, Sarah Bergstrom, and also now Andrew Wolf is apparently, still clinging to life, but is in bad shape. And Trump posted this long rant. You could see his anger, and I think that reflecting the anger that a lot of folks feel about the fact that, we brought over tens and tens of thousands of folks from Afghanistan. Theoretically, these were all our allies, folks who had worked with us during that war, but were apparently, not necessarily properly vetted. And I think that's, we have a situation in the country where we let in so many people during the Biden administration. They were coming across the border. We were flying them in. We were granting everyone temporary protected status and asylum and refugee status. And there's no way that all of those folks, and bringing them in, by the way, from countries that are not necessarily our friends and folks who may have, in fact, had, not have our best interests at heart. And there's no way that we vetted them all properly, no matter what the government says. And Alejandro Mayorkas said we did, but then kind of said we didn't. So I understand where the president's coming from. We'll see what this turns out to in terms of an actual policy proposal. But the idea that we want to get people who came here, either illegally, of course, or came here legally through some sort of protected status, but weren't vetted properly, that we need to look at those people. And if they're not, if they are a threat to us in some way, getting them out of the country, and that's totally understandable.
Carl, how do you see it?
Well, that I don't know if that's what Tom's talking about is actually relevant to this case, or the president, because certainly what Tom said is true. I mean, if 8 to 10 million people can't cross the border after President Biden and Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, basically opened the southern border, nobody in the government even knows who these people are. They were given a piece of paper, show up for your asylum hearing, on August 33rd, 2039 or something. I mean, I'm making that up, but it was an open border. So you don't know who those people are, and there are millions of them. But this guy is not one of those people. He came here, he's invited by the government because he was apparently working with the CIA in Afghanistan during the long U.S. war there. If the media reports I've seen are correct, he was part of a unit that fought the Taliban. He was very much on the United States side, and would have likely been killed for supporting America if he had not been allowed to come here. So then he turns bad, and he's only 29. But we're trying to figure. The government, I guess, is trying to figure out, was he radicalized? Was he a mental case? There were reports. NBC had a report. He's been deeply depressed, locking himself in a darkened room for weeks at a time, not talking to his own children. He has 5 sons, I believe, and lives in Bellingham, Washington. So this is, did he have a psychotic break, or is this a political killing? And not unlike the cases over there during the war where these people were thought to be friendly, were helping Americans, suddenly turned on and started shooting Americans. And he was, a sleeper agent, a jihadist, or just sort of, or some combination of that where he couldn't find a job here and he gradually became disillusioned. But make no mistake, this is an ugly and horrible crime, a hate crime, really, a hate crime against America. He killed this 20-year-old woman who everybody says is just the light of the world. And I don't blame the president for being angry. I was angry. But I think it's important when we start to make public policy on these things that, first of all, we're not guided solely by anger, but we're guided by our own self-interest and mercy for the family, but also mercy for people, not this guy, but other people who helped the United States and really want to live here and be part of the American experiment.
Yeah. I mean, so he came here in 2021. As you say, he was here under this humanitarian parole. He was granted asylum. And what's so difficult about this, I think, is that when they say he was heavily vetted, I kind of believe them, because you are vetted when you come in on these programs. He's just the kind of person, when you hear his background, that we don't leave behind, because as you guys point out, if you leave them behind, they're going to get killed. And these are people who have helped us. These are usually translators, they're embassy personnel, they're like people like this who have been informants or helped the CIA in some way. And we bring them here because when we leave them behind, we know what happens in places like Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan. They do not fare well after we leave those countries. So I think we have to have, if we're going to be successful overseas, we have to have programs where we bring these people with us when we leave if we lose. That seems to be an important part of our foreign policy. So we're going to have to keep that. Tom, he did sort of turn around and sort of go after the Somalis, especially in Minnesota, which even Trump admitted had nothing to do with his crime, but somehow he's conflated these issues in his mind and in his public statements.
Well, that's the weave, which we've become accustomed to, right? Because there were these stories that came out. Chris Rufo reported it first last week, and then the New York Times, of all places, actually followed up with a story, I think late last week, talking about this fraud that's been uncovered in Minneapolis, where there's a huge Somali population, immigrant population. It's like 80,000 or 100,000 people. It's the district that Ilhan Omar represents, and they uncovered this, and it happened around COVID, where these NGOs, these little, organizations, it first was like it was like a free meals for kids program or something. And they kept sort of peeling back the onion, and lo and behold, it was hundreds of people, multiple organizations, to the tune of $1 billion of taxpayer money thus far that has been basically fraudulently stolen. And through these folks who were filing fake invoices and claiming they were doing all these services for people that they simply weren't doing. And so that's the story. And it's an important story. And by the way, Tim Walz was running for vice president at the time that all this was going on, and nobody looked into it. Nobody, really investigated any of this stuff. Walz was on Meet the Press over the weekend and said, didn't take responsibility for it, basically said, well, I put some people in jail and that's what I'm responsible for. But I mean, this was a massive graft operation that occurred on his watch in Minnesota, again, to the tune of $1 billion taxpayer dollars. And that's what Trump was. So Trump was, going in this direction and obviously veered off. And as you said, he admitted they don't have anything to do with each other, but it's another example of folks who come into the country and take advantage of America, take advantage of our largesse, right? At the social services that we provide. In this case, it was the tax dollars that were, or the slush funds, the money that was just pouring out of the government during COVID to try and help people. And they were not the only ones, by the way, who took advantage of that in fraudulent ways. But the fact that it was rife throughout the community is noteworthy, and I think deserves further investigation.
Carl, certainly, I think Tom makes a good point. This was a pretty extensive crime by a small number of Somalis. There are about 60,000, 70,000 Somalis, I guess, in the state. when we paint this broad brush, though, isn't that a problem? I mean, to Tom's point, sure, there were some Somalis that did something bad in Minnesota and it should be investigated. But to say that, as he did, Somalis have, quote, caused us a lot of trouble, and talk about revoking their TPS, is that really the way we want policy to be made in the United States?
Well, there seems to be a subculture of criminality in Minnesota among these immigrants from Somalia, and it's Tom points out it's large and massive for a crime, and you point out, and it's small by the percentage of people from this community who've come to this country, and these people came when Bill Clinton was president, and most of these people are second generation now. They're not even immigrants, so or about I don't say most, but yeah, probably about half. And so, but they're represented by this congresswoman who, is far left and part of the squad, hates Trump, and herself has, there have been some scrutiny about her own immigration policies. There's something about this wave of immigration in this century that bothers people, and it's this sense of entitlement of the immigrants. The anti-Americanism certainly is a new wrinkle on people. The United States has done this for many years. In the 50s, they took thousands of Greeks as there was some coup there, and I think the CIA must have been implicated. And these people were settled around the country, places, and they were very grateful to be here. And if you listen to, this Congressman Omar, she doesn't sound grateful. She sounds kind of resentful about America, and so that sticks in people's craw. But your point, Andy, I mean, the answer is obviously no. This is not how we want to make public policy. Assuming whole groups of people are criminals because a few are criminals. But and Trump's going to be criticized for this, and
Right.
probably should be. It's just, his lack of precision with language is a problem here, because whose fault is this, that this money was stolen? Well, I'm not taking these criminals off the hook, but Governor Walz, yeah, that's where the buck should stop. Let's start with that. California during COVID, there was much more than $1 billion in fraudulent money, and a lot of it, millions of it, went to people in prison. And California prisons we can apply for this COVID money. They were mailing COVID checks to inmates. The fraud was so rife. And this is not even I say it's not just Minnesota, it's California. It's not even just America. Sweden, Denmark, these countries, these Western countries that want to be generous, that want to help migrants, have had the fraud rings of people, most of them from the Mideast, of going up there and apply for welfare. They don't even live there. They get money for, and then people say, oh, where'd the money go? So what we need is more accountability. You can be generous and not be a fool. You don't just give away billions of dollars. And so I guess what I would like the president to do is look at this United States government and say, okay, why were we giving money to, why didn't anybody in the federal government notice that Minnesota was billing Medicaid and Medicare for hundreds of millions of dollars?
Can I add something to that, Carl?
Yeah.
The first part of your point, which is part of, I think, what is disturbing to many Americans is, look at, for example, Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan. You had people there chanting "Death to America." These are, Arab immigrants. And the Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, who represents that district, would not condemn it. She wouldn't simply, it was an easy thing to do. She wouldn't do it. She said she wouldn't talk to Fox News. Maybe she'll condemn it on MSNBC, although I doubt it. And I doubt she'd even get asked the question on MSNBC. But this idea that we are letting people immigrate here who still have, don't want to assimilate. That's the great thing about us being a melting pot over all these decades, is that there was assimilation. People learned the language, they adopted the values, they pursued their dreams. It was all great, happy, one happy, healthy country. And then we started importing people who, want to bring their culture to our land and are not interested in assimilating and are instead interested in preserving their culture in a way that is they don't want to speak the language. They don't want to,
Well, wait, Tom.
necessarily.
Tom, I don't think that's quite right. Most of these people speak English. They were chanting "Death to America."
Well, but you
Wait.
get my point.
I think it's not assimilation exactly. I like that they're trying to preserve their culture. What's bothersome about it is they're trying to basically overthrow the government. They're trying to undo the American way of life, and they seem animated by hatred of Jews. They don't have a great love for democracy. It's more fundamental than just. It's not that they want to keep their language and keep their food. It's that they haven't bought into the
No, but
American idea.
even think back to like the stuff that was going on in L.A., right, with the ICE, and there were all these folks that were, they had Mexican flags out, and they were, throwing stuff at the cop cars. I mean, it's this idea, and I think that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I mean, we are the United States of America. If you move here and you want to live here, then you should want to be part of the American experiment. And
I
what
agree
we're
with you
seeing is
totally, except
right.
California is a little different. California belonged to Mexico before it belonged to the United
Cannon,
States.
stop it.
Right.
Stop it.
Well, here's my question, guys.
R.I.P. the comments on YouTube.
Right. But I wonder how different it really is this time. Because if you go back and you look at when we had great waves of immigration before, there's always been a pushback, and there's always been this kind of discussion that the Irish or Polish or whoever it is coming in and they're bringing their filthy habits with them, and
they chanted "Death to America." They did. I missed
well,
that.
No, that's my question. My question is it really different this time? Is there something about either the large number, even though there have been times in our history where we've had bigger proportionality of immigrants? But is there something about the times we live in that really make it different, Carl? That's my question.
Yeah, you know what? I think Tom might be right. Yeah, this Irish.
It is different.
These Irish came off the boats in New York in the 1860s and were promptly get handed a Union uniform and go to fight in the Civil War. They didn't chant. They had riots, but they didn't chant "Death to America." So there's something going on. It's this worldwide clash of ideas, but it's become fashionable to certainly bash Israel and to criticize anything that you do, any vile act, to say, "Oh, I don't really hate Jews. I don't really hate. I just don't like Zionists." Well, that's a fig leaf. These people are anti. There is an anti-Americanism, a strain of that among recent immigrants that I think is new, and I think we need to talk about it, confront it. We don't need to overreact about it. We don't need to generalize about it. We don't need to send people back to a country, for one thing, where they've never lived. Let's just say that, ever. And we shouldn't. President Trump is tapping into a feeling in America. He is. But I'd like him to be more precise and to lead and to make sure that what needs to happen is these people need to be encouraged to believe in America and love America, and talking about them, especially in racial terms or in ethnic terms, I think confirms their worst fears. So you can make this problem is bad, but you can make it worse by reacting badly.
Tom?
I mean, I agree with Carl a little bit. I do think that this is, when Trump says he wants to stop immigration and asylum from all third world countries, I think he is reacting to the exactly what we were just talking about, the fact that we have let a lot of people come in this country over the last 4 years in particular, but even beyond that, and we haven't done a good job of vetting them, finding out who they are, making sure that they're not criminals and they actually want to be here and assimilate and are doing it in the proper way. And when you do that, it creates conflict in these cities, in these towns, cultural conflict, and it's bad for America. And I think we have to, our immigration problem, system has been so screwed up for so long, and Congress has never gotten around to fixing it in sort of a proper way, that, and I don't know that there's any hope that they ever will, but if we want, immigration should be a priority of getting a system that does all the things that we want it to do, allows people to come here who want to be here, weeds out the people who are bad and are coming here for nefarious reasons or don't want to adopt our values, but we just can't ever seem to get there.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom, and we'll be back with more right after this. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, he's in the hot seat again. The Intercept first reported that the two survivors of this September 2nd attack on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean, they were killed after they were seen clinging to the wreckage. If true, that would be a war crime under the Geneva Convention. And according to The Intercept and subsequent reporting by the Washington Post, Hegseth had given verbal orders to, quote, kill everybody. Hegseth calls this whole claim and story, quote, fabricated, inflammatory, and derogatory. And President Trump said on Air Force One that he had confidence in Hegseth, but also said that he would not have wanted that second strike. So, Carl, how much trouble is Hegseth in this time?
Well, I don't know, because he's got a jury of one, and that's Donald Trump. I noticed that you are served as the jury and the appeals court on what's a war crime, Andy.
I'm fairly confident in my position, but go ahead.
Well, I covered George W. Bush for 8 years. His certitude never wavered. That didn't mean he was always right, Andy. It was a charming trait because it was consistent. Here's the thing. To recap, or just to go back a minute, I'm very uncomfortable with these strikes, and I've said so on the show, and many Americans are. The legal justice, the rationale that the president has offered and the Secretary of War is that these cartels have been designated as basically foreign terrorists, that we're at war with these cartels. These are combatants, and they're narco terrorists. And so you start to think, those aren't really. We didn't get a declaration of war against them. Congress didn't act. They're not a nation state. It's already a murky area. And so, but we know how we treat combatants in a war. And so if you shoot prisoners of war, that's against the Geneva Conventions. And that's not something the United States condones. You would be charged with violating the United States military code if you did it. Strafing people in the water from airplanes, which both sides did in World War II in the war in the Pacific. That's a little different. That's gray area.
No, it's not.
What happened in this case, according to the Intercept, is that we would have half the pilots in the U.S. fleet would have been war criminals, according to you, Andy, in World War II. But I'll leave that aside because you weren't born then, and neither was I. But we need to be precise about the sequence because these stories are not precise. The Intercept and the Washington Post. The Washington Post has this quote that you read, Andy. Said, kill them all. Did that quote take place in real time, after the first drone strike had rendered this boat, I think, with 11 people on it, a drug boat, and presumably the others are dead, and you have these two people? Did somebody say, do we arrest these people? Do we let them float? Do we leave them there? What do we do? Kill them all? If that's what Hegseth did, that's what you're talking about, Andy. And that's something that would, I think, probably lead to Trump asking for his resignation and maybe the kind of actions you're talking about in The Hague. If that quote comes before this even started, there's going to be drone follow-up. You're anticipating what happens. What happens if we only partially disable the boat? Well, kill them all. That's, in other words, if it's issued beforehand, it's a little different, maybe a lot different, and it suggests then if you don't like that, then you don't like the whole policy. Now, I don't like the whole policy. I don't think they should be doing this at all. But so when Hegseth says that didn't happen, we may be talking. There may be two conversations going past each other. But these are the conversations we're going to start having now, and I think they're overdue. And you had these 6 Democrats who gave this, their thing, like their what do you call that, Tom? When they do like Imagine on different voices in different continents.
Like
You
a
mean
montage?
the video montage? Yeah.
Yeah, the video montage. And they write up, they tell people don't obey an illegal order, but they never say any order they think is illegal. And Mark Kelly, one of the senators, is asked point blank, are these strikes illegal? He won't say that. So there's this gray area about whether this is even something is the United States should be doing. I think no, but is it a crime? Who knows? There were strikes like this when Bill Clinton was president, when Barack Obama was president. There were times when the CIA assisted one in Honduras, killed a U.S. missionary, a woman and her daughter. But you didn't have the president and secretary of state bragging about it. What you usually had was the CIA denying that it was at fault. That was, I think, maybe the Panama. And then in this case, the DEA just lying about what they'd done in Honduras, because you didn't have people bragging about these killings. And that's what elevates this. So the core issue is, are these legal at all? And then secondly, what exactly are the rules of engagement? And if you disable the ship and these people are floating in the water, should the Coast Guard be sent to rescue them? They can go to trial. They can be anything. Or you just kill them. And I think most Americans, and I know I'm speaking for you, Andy, are very uncomfortable with the just kill them idea.
Well, we should say, Tom, first of all, that there's 2 unnamed sources for this story, as far as I can tell. So
the Post story?
For the Post story. So it may not be true at all. And Carl's point, the timing of Pete Hegseth's involvement is very important, because if he said this before this happened and it was just sort of a comment, was an oral comment apparently, does that have any bearing at all? But someone ordered this second strike. If that's true, if someone did order a second strike, that is a problem. It is against the Geneva Convention, Carl. I hate to tell you, but it's the convention is called the Convention for the Amelioration of the Condition of Wounded, Sick, and Shipwrecked Members of Armed Forces at Sea. That's the official title of it. It's pretty specific about what you can and cannot do. And we should just acknowledge it's not really a matter of debate whether or not you can shoot someone who's clinging to the wreckage of a ship. That's just against the Geneva Convention. I'll just leave it there. But Tom, go ahead.
Well, let's. Carl mentioned this video, so let's just step back for a second, because I'm going to get a little conspiratorial, because in politics, it's if you believe in coincidences, you'll often find yourself acting naively. And so we have these Democrats who release unprompted this video that they put together last week or week before last, saying basically you can't follow any urging the military not to follow any illegal orders. As Carl mentioned, Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, some others were on the shows, I guess it was week before last, and were asked, are there any illegal orders? And they said, well, we don't know of any. And then, the next week, 2 anonymous sources leaked this story to The Intercept and the Washington Post, saying that, oh, by the way, Pete Hegseth gave these 2 orders. So, is that a coincidence? I don't know. I'll leave it up to our listeners to decide if they think that that's a coincidence or not. I do think it is not clear, and it is important. If Hegseth said kill them all, and this was, apparently it's an admiral at Fort Bragg who actually oversaw the operation, gave the initial order, and he might have been the one who gave the second order. In which case, right, he might
if there was a second order.
If there was a second order, no, I agree. This could just all be a hoax. I mean,
well, there was this.
God knows that our media has made it very, very difficult to take the stuff that they report at face value, particularly when it is attacking Trump's administration and it's using anonymous sources. So, I mean, all of that sort of almost goes without saying, but we probably should say it again because, the media reacts to this stuff. People react. The Democrats are reacting to this as if it was, it's absolute truth. And we don't know that it's true at all. Pete Hegseth said to Trump, apparently said, look, I didn't do this. And we don't know what he means by that. That wasn't clear either. He did post this thing to X of Franklin, the turtle, like the cover of like a kid's book with like Franklin's got like an RPG and he's, shooting rockets down at these drug boats in the water, which, to Carl's point, it's a little unseemly to be bragging about this stuff. I mean, I guess that's Pete Hegseth's way of doubling down on the policy and on whatever order he gave or didn't give. But that kind of stuff is like, really? I mean, it's a little over the top and certainly unnecessary. And I think makes a little bit of a mockery of what are pretty serious. It's a serious policy question. It's a serious legal question, and they should be taken seriously and treated that way.
And here's what I was trying to say about the gray area. We don't know that there were two orders given. We know that, and to Tom's point, caveat, we think we know, but we're going by what the press tells us, that there were two drone strikes. And what I'm saying is if the original order is, if the boat isn't destroyed, we have another drone. Then that, and that drone is, seconds later or minutes later. That's not the same thing as, shooting wounded men on the battlefield necessarily, because we don't know what the people who dispatched the drones knew. We don't know. My point is the original order to destroy this boat, period. To me, that's the fundamental thing we ought to be describing. That's what we ought to be debating. Is that what the United States should be doing? I say no. To me, it's a secondary issue. You disable the boat, then you kill these other guys, and you're saying, oh, but that's now a violation of the Geneva Convention because they were distressed sailors. But we don't know. There's nobody on the scene. You're doing this by robots. You're not. These are drones. There's not even pilots on the plane. So it to me it undermines the whole project. Is what I'm not excusing it as much as I'm saying I think the whole thing is wrong.
And so go ahead, Andy.
No, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but
but you're certainly going to. It's a war crime.
You don't want to conflate two things, Carl. That's what I'm saying. There is a debate over whether or not it's a good policy. There's a debate over whether or not it's legal to fire on these boats, although I think it probably is. It is not legal to shoot people who are in the water. And that's something that, people, because I say this because I know people are going to say about this show, they're going to say, oh, they're drug dealers. We should just get rid of them. We should kill them all. But there's reasons why we have rules of warfare. And it's important for us to think about them because those could have been U.S. soldiers in the Mediterranean or in the Persian Gulf. And we'd expect our combatants to observe the rules of war. Anyway, Tom, I know I sound like a international lawyer, but go ahead.
Carl mentioned these historical attacks. Well, you don't have to go back that far. In fact, you only have to go back to 2021, where Joe Biden, under his administration, his Defense Department launched a drone attack in Afghanistan. They thought they were killing an ISIS terrorist. Turns out they killed a guy who worked for a California-based NGO company and killed him and 7 of his children. There were 10 people that died in that attack. 7 of them were little children. Mark Milley came out and called it a righteous attack. And for the better part of a year, the military insisted that they had done nothing wrong. It was all fine. And then finally, a year later in 2022, they announced, oh, oops, by the way, we're sorry. We actually did kill civilians and, we're really sorry. Nobody got fired for that. There were no war crime tribunals. There was nothing that was done. And by the way, there was no outcry in the media as far as I could tell either, going back to look and say, where was the, investigation and where were, holding these folks accountable. So I just, let's keep all of this stuff in proper context. And I always, 2 wrongs do not make a right. Okay. But I always got to point out the double standards that exist are real and they need to be taken into account here as well.
All right. Well,
that's my dead horse that I beat.
Fair enough. Well, guys, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm here with Tom and Carl. We'll be back in a moment. But before we go, listen to this. We're all looking for ways to make more money. But let's be honest, the idea of learning something new, taking on more risk, or working harder, nobody wants that these days. And that's where TrueTrade comes in. Their AI-driven technology enables you to generate income passively without risking your own capital, wasting your time, or needing years of experience. TrueTrade has created institutional-grade software, the same type hedge funds and big banks use, but now it's available to everyday people like you and me. And here's the best part. They'll even guarantee your trading capital. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can use to trade with. And I don't know about you, but that kind of funding could be life-changing. Looking for a smarter way to make more money? Download their mobile app on Android or iOS, or go to truetrade.io right now. That's TRUTRADE.io. Funded accounts are limited, so don't wait. Reserve your funding today and let technology earn for you. See terms to learn more. Guys, there's this New Yorker article. It's on the front page of RCP, so you can find it at RealClearPolitics.com today. It's by Benjamin Wallace Wells. Interesting piece, and it reads in part this. It says, quote, "During the Trump era, political violence has become an increasingly urgent problem. Elected officials from both parties are struggling to respond." Carl, the gist of the article, or the takeaway, seems to be that people are becoming increasingly fearful to enter politics or engage in political life because of the threat of violence. Is that that's
right?
Did you get that takeaway as well?
Well, that's right. And they quote the writer talked to Josh Shapiro. We forget this. The stuff, Andy. There's so much violence. We forget stuff. It happens, and then something else happens. The governor of Pennsylvania, the mansion was firebombed by a person who, objected, because Josh Shapiro is Jewish, and I guess he, supports Israel, but he's actually a person who's spoken with great temperance about Palestinian rights and Israel. And, and he said, Josh Shapiro said, I don't think we ought to get too much into the motivations of these people. They're unwell. We shouldn't apply linear thinking to them, because obviously what they're doing isn't logical. And I take his point, and that's going to turn out to be part of the equation with this guy we talked up at the top of the show, this Afghani who murdered this National Guards woman. But I think Josh Shapiro is maybe a little benign about it, because if you the two political parties, and to my way of thinking, more of the Democrats than the Republicans, but the way they talk about the opposition, you're unleashing these nuts, and you have to know you're doing it. And the members of Congress who are talking this way should know better than anyone else, because that same article, I think, pointed out that there used to be like 2,000 threats a year. Now there's 10,000. That's a five-fold increase. And it's probably worse than that, because before most of the threats were idle, and now they don't know whether they're idle or not. Charlie Kirk is killed. They tried to kill. There were 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life. This Minnesota Speaker of the House was killed, and her husband, and her answering the door. These are political crimes, and these people do it. They have. I don't know about the first instance in Butler, Pennsylvania, because the FBI won't tell us
the cover up.
No, yeah. I was trying to think of a way to not say that.
Let me help you out with that, Carl.
but these people they have political motivations, and they say what they are. And there was a case I remember in 2016 when Trump was running, a guy, a raving lunatic in Philadelphia, opened fire and shot policemen, and screaming at the top of his voice, in Arabic, "God is greatest, God is great." And the mayor came and said, "This has nothing to do with Islam." And I thought, well, I know what he's trying to say, but the guy himself certainly thought it had something to do with Islam. And so, these old bromides that, George W. Bush and the good government types, including me, are always telling each other, I'm not sure they apply anymore. And so it sometimes feels like the country is already having a low-grade civil war, and that violence in the street, in people's homes, in their churches, synagogues, that everything's fair game. And so the import of that story is that people, rational people who love their family, Andy, people who are not political junkies, but feel the kind of people who used to come to Washington because they thought they should contribute and do something, they're going to be more hesitant to go into politics because they're not going to want to put their families' lives at risk. I thought it was a very bracing article and frightening, really, for the future of the country.
Well, Tom, you put it on the front page. Tell us why.
Well, because Carl recommended it. Carl sent it through and said, we need to talk about this. No, look, political violence is a problem. And look, part of what we do at RealClearPolitics is we pair the left and the right. And this is clearly a sort of left-leaning, publication. The New Yorker, Benjamin Wallace Wells, a left-leaning author, interviews Josh Shapiro. And the whole framing of the piece is during the Trump era, right? Trump's responsible for this. Right? In
well,
some
he didn't
form
say
or
that
fashion.
explicitly.
Well, yeah. That's the implication, Carl. And so I paired that with a piece from John Hinderaker at Powerline blog, guys up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who've been doing this for a long, long time, basically talking about the increase in the attacks on ICE agents and the way that the title of that piece was Democrat calls for violence are increasing and they're being successful. Democrats have been out there calling these ICE agents, Gestapo, all sorts of horrible name, Nazis and whatever, and legitimizing effectively resistance against them, both nonviolent but also violent, and we've seen that in city after city around the country. And so, look. Our politics is about as toxic as it's been since at least the 1960s, maybe even, as Carl mentions, the 1860s, okay? We no longer disagree with each other on issues. We disagree with each other on issues, but we no longer think that's merely a policy disagreement. If Carl thinks, if Carl has a position on immigration, one position, I have a different position, well, he's a bad person. He's trying to, he's an existential threat to my way of life. And therefore I can, and I talk about him in those terms, then it's much, much easier. And you throw in social media on top of it, where a lot of these threats come from. And again, to Carl's point, it's hard to know whether they're legitimate or not legitimate, but there's certainly, people will say outrageous stuff to each other online because they're anonymous. And so that's increased, I think, the overall level of toxicity of our political environment. But we now view each other not just as citizens who hold different positions. Mm-hmm. We view each other as the enemy, and the other person is evil, and they're a threat to our way of life. And therefore that, as Carl said, it allows people to do what Tyler Robinson did and go assassinate someone for simply speaking and debating policies. And that is a scary, scary thing.
Yeah. Well, I commend the New Yorker piece to people. I actually was, I guess, pleasantly surprised. I thought that while it did make reference to the Trump era, by having so much about the Pennsylvania governor in it, who's the guy who lit that fire, of course, was not a Trump supporter. That's sort of important to point out, right? I mean, so I thought it was more balanced than I sometimes expect from the New Yorker, and I will say I've been a New Yorker subscriber since I was about 17 years old. So I keep supporting the magazine, even though I disagree with it occasionally. But the other thing, and this is, of course, coming out of the Thanksgiving vacation or holiday, when there were all these stories, we talked about them last week, about how to talk to your crazy Trump uncle. It's always your Trump uncle that is somehow causing trouble at the table, and never your Mom Donnie supporting niece. But Carl, the lack of what intermediary institutions, if you want to call it that, but the fact that we sort of exist now without people don't go to church. They don't go to their community meetings. They aren't members of the Kiwanis Club. All these sort of institutions where you sort of had to deal with your fellow human beings in a sort of non-political way have been diminished. And we're left sort of with this social media, which is where we're sort of atomized, and a media that is increasingly partisan. And that to me seems to be what's driving it. And it would be nice if people sort of got back out there, met one another, and realized that there's things to talk about besides politics, and you can even talk about politics in a civil manner.
Well, I couldn't have said it better, Andy, but and I don't mean to toot our own horn, but I guess I do. That's the beauty of Real Clear Politics. And that's the beauty of this specifically our show, our podcast, because the three of us, we disagree and disagree about substantive things. Some things a war crime or not a war crime. That's an important thing. But you and I can disagree about it, not only respectfully, but with affection, because we know the person. We've been golfing together. We've been in each other's houses. We're friends. Our families are friends. We understand the other guy's humanity. We understand the guy's sincere actor. And that's how most Americans used to feel about each other. Republicans about Democrats, Democrats about Republicans. And the loss of these institutions that you talk about, you don't all overstate it. I mean, tens of millions of Americans do go to church every Sunday. And the Kiwanis, there's a nice Kiwanis chapter right near your house. You and I haven't been there, but we probably should have.
I've been there.
Yeah. Okay. But the point, I guess, that bothers me, and I know it bothers Tom because he has a daily rant about it, is the media used to be more of used to contribute to the civility. The media the legacy media would, if a politician got too far out on a limb, would sort of make fun of it and bring him back to reality. Instead, now you hear a talking point from the Democrats. You don't know, did that start on the press or did that start with the Democrats? I mean,
well, they reward, the crazier stuff you say, the more attention you get, and then you say crazier, you continue to ratchet up your crazy until, it's a one-way street to, insanity.
So the press sort of abdicated its historical responsibility, and then social media is like supercharged it. So people like Jasmine Crockett or Marjorie Taylor Greene are like the faces of their political party, and they've done nothing in the party. They're responsible for no interesting legislation. They've never said anything interesting they've said interesting things, but nothing that was sane and interesting. But millions of followers on social media for the reason Tom just said. Yeah, the crazier it is, the more conflict it is, and somehow we have to figure out how to break that cycle.
Carl, if you just start tweeting about Jewish space lasers, you'll have 1 million followers in no time.
Yeah, well, I'm stuck on 9,500 for the past 3 years.
You are not built for social media, my friend. You're too mild-mannered and sane.
Well,
too measured and thoughtful.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. This has been a thoughtful discussion today. I really appreciate it. That's our program. If you're listening on the podcast apps or watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, send us a comment. I do read them. It's great to hear from you. Let us know if you think we're too
You're going to hear
reasonable.
from them today, Andy.
That's right. Anyway, I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. On behalf of everyone at RCP, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.